Let's practice an example where we are working through a word problem, and we'll work through those strategies that we had on our list. So here's the word problem that we're working with. Let me make sure my pen is ready to go. So we're driving from Lexington, Kentucky to South Bend, Indiana, and the cities are 308 miles apart. We're driving on the highway at 65 miles per hour, and the problem wants to know, after 2 hours of driving, how far away from South Bend are we? So the first thing that we have in our strategy toolkit is to make a list of the information we have, because it's kind of hard for our brains to process those pieces in paragraph form. But if we have it in a list, it's a little bit easier to see what we're working with. So let's start with that. So the first thing we know is that we're going from Lexington to South Bend. So that's the direction that we're driving. And then we know that they are 308 miles apart. So let me make that note here. They're 308 miles apart. Okay. Then we're told that we're driving on the highway at 65 miles per hour. So we drive at 65 miles per hour. And then the question asks us, after 2 hours of driving, how far away from South Bend are you? So the question is, after 2 hours, we want to know the distance to South Bend. So by writing it in this list form, we immediately see how many pieces of information we have and what those are. Now our second strategy is to define our variables. So we're going to have variables x and y. So variables. We're going to use x and we're going to use y. And we want to define what those are. So there's a couple of general trends that you'll see. So whenever you're dealing with money, the money is usually the y variable. In this case, we're not dealing with money, so that's not an issue. Usually if time is one of the things you're measuring, that's usually the x variable. And in this case, we do have time. We have hours. So x is going to be hours. It's going to be our time. So then y is whatever we haven't already covered. So y is going to be miles. That's the other thing that we are measuring, or distance. If your problem doesn't fall into either of those two categories, if either it has money, in which case you're dealing with y being the money, or it has time, in which case you're dealing with x being the time, the other way you can kind of tell which variable is the easiest to be which, notice that we have a rate here. We have 65 miles per hour. The thing that's the per is the thing you want to be the x, because you're going to be multiplying it by x. So when you see this rate, it's going to be something per something. So the per part, the thing that's sort of in your denominator of your rate, that's what you want to make your x variable. Okay, so we actually already wrapped up our third strategy in that. We were paying attention to the units that we're looking at. So now let's write an equation. So we're working with lines, and so our equation is going to be the equation of a line. So let's start with y equals. Okay, so y is distance. Remember, y is in miles. X is in time. So we're going to need to, on the other side, also have miles. So we're going to have to convert hours to miles. And the way we do that is by multiplying by the speed that we're driving at, multiplying by the rate. And this is why when you're dealing with a rate, the thing that's in the per is the thing you want to be x, so that we can do this and say, aha, if I do 65 times x, 65 is miles over hours, x is hours, so the hours cancel and we're just left with miles, which matches the unit on the other side. These things wouldn't be able to be equal if the units don't match. So, okay, we're doing good there. But that's not the only information we have. Really, y is the thing that we're looking for here. Y is miles from South Bend. So actually, we're going to want to make this negative here because we're driving towards South Bend. So we are driving, we are getting closer to South Bend. Our distance from South Bend is getting smaller, and so our rate should be negative. Okay, so now we look at the information we have. We look at our list and say, yep, we took into account the fact that we're going from Lexington to South Bend. Oh wait, but we didn't take into account the 308. So y, remember, is miles from South Bend. So the other side also needs to be miles from South Bend. So this is going to be our y-intercept at 308 because it's where we start. We start 308 miles from South Bend, and then with every passing hour, we are 65 miles closer to South Bend. So we are 65 miles less far away, which is why we have the negative. Okay, so there's our equation, and now we can answer our question. So after 2 hours, that means we're looking for x, which is our hours, to be 2. So when x is 2, y, which is the thing we're looking for, the miles from South Bend, we just plug it into our equation. Times 2 plus 308. 65 times 2 is 130, so we have negative 130 plus 308, and that simplifies to 178. So the answer to this question is 178 miles from South Bend.